Hasheem Thabeet, I forgot about him. The straight scrub when he came to the NBA, but in college he was dominated as a mug, bro. And I think he's probably the biggest bust of all time.
Yo, what it is, what it ain't, YouTube. This your boy MJT coming at you with another banger reaction video, man. Let's get it, let's go. I'm recording this video. Today is my birthday. Shout out to God for 31 years for me on this earth, man. It's a blessing. Thank you, Lord Jesus. And yeah, man, we finna react to this video right quick, but I'm finna react to NBA players that were doomed to fail. Now, if I watch the thumbnail, I mean, it's a lot of players that was kind of like doomed to fail, bro. Especially this year with Bronny and what's going on with Bronny. Anything that he does is getting posted on social media. I think he only scored like 6 total points in like 3 preseason games. It's bad for him, but man, he's a rookie. Hey, let him work. He's a raw NBA prospect, bro. Let him work, man. Let him work, bro. And yeah, man, we finna get into this video, man, right quick. Let's get into it.
These 5 players were bound to crash and burn in their NBA careers, starting out with Bronny James, who seems to be doomed before his career has even had a chance to begin. Although it's too soon to label the Bronny James experiment a failure, it's definitely soon enough to make the prediction, simply due to the fact that had he not had the name James on the back of his jersey, Bronny would be a backup on a bad college team. Bronny, up to this point in his career, simply has not been a standout player by any metric, although with long arms and above average athleticism with some GOAT genetics makes his defensive ceiling high, we really have yet to see his offensive game begin to formulate at all, playing on the very stacked Sierra Canyon.
So everything that Bronny James is going through, take that's his name. Do you blame his father? Because he named him Bronny James, or he named him LeBron James Jr. He got the Lakers to draft him number 55 overall, even though there was better players in the draft. Yeah, man, Brian is probably the most polarizing player of all time. So it's like, did he really put his son in the right position to win? I don't know, man. I don't know.
In roster, Bronny put up a respectable 14 points, 5 rebounds, and 2 assists with nearly 2 rips a game, which, although it may have been a bit overkill, was enough for Bronny to be slotted in as the 20th ranked prospect in his class on ESPN's Top 100 board. Although the world has had their eyes on Bronny and his development since basically the time he was born, the criticisms would not start pouring in until Bronny would graze a collegiate floor the following season. It was clear in high school that although being significantly shorter than his dad, Bronny was a much different player than his dad. But still, most people really believed that there was no reason to think they couldn't play his role at a high level of competition. In high school, Bronny proved that he was an athletic point guard with great defensive instincts, a good-looking jump shot form, and flashes of playmaking that make you hopeful that he could come anywhere near his sky-high ceiling. But off of little more to go off than mixtapes and highlight reels, college was a rude awakening of the status of Bronny's development. Despite being labeled at 6'4", Bronny was clearly undersized at the point guard position, and as his official height measurement would change to 6'1½", this 2.5-inch drop certainly changed the way you look at his potential on the floor. His undersized build certainly,
but you can't take that into consideration because the man had a cardiac arrest during that season too, bro. So he was trying to make it. It's just you have to have the right mindset to make it back from that. So it's like, man, shout out to Bronny James, bro. You to even be back in your position and still make it to the NBA, even though your father had a lot to do with it, you still had to put in the work every single day to get back to where you is now. All you got to do right now is just get better. Go to the G League. They're going to play you the first game because they want to have that father-son moment with you and LeBron James anyway. But after that, go to the G League and get better, bro. You probably need to be in the G League for like at least 2 years. 2 years, man. Just get better, bro, and you're going to be there. You definitely gonna be there with the hard work.
Only concern, but became a much bigger concern when his skill was put under a microscope. Playing a limited role on a bad team, Bronny was only able to average 4.8 points per game on a miserable 36% from the field and 27% from 3 in 19 minutes a game. Putting up bad stats on a bad team was enough of a cause for concern for him to fall from late first round in the preseason mock draft boards to all the way off of the draft board completely. It's really, how can you blame them? As a 6'1" guard who averaged just 2 assists per game in high school, his playmaking skills are heavily speculative and unproven, to put it generously. His defense is heavily limited by height, as well as his finishing around the basket, which is kind of poor altogether. To make matters worse, A longtime concern of Bronny's game, which is his high and loose handle on the ball, was to where USC would force other players to bring up the ball, running a 6'1" guard who shoots 27% from 3 as an off-ball player. I mean, the potential role that this guy could play other than being the CEO of jersey sales in the NBA is hard to conjure up. He doesn't look confident on the floor, his skills aren't really anywhere near an NBA level, and he really seems to be figuring out his place as a player. But regardless of his situation, as a guy mocked out of the draft boards, every NBA scout saying this kid isn't an NBA player and multiple possible developmental years left at the college level, Bronny took to the NBA draft portal as an inefficient 5-point per game scorer that's undersized for his position.
I think he only declared for the draft because of his father. His father don't have that much years left to play in the NBA, so they just want to have that moment on the court. That's all.
With all eyes on him at the NBA draft combine, Bronny was able to greatly climb up the ladder of potential draft prospects after clocking a vertical leap over 40 inches, a wingspan over 6'7", and a 19 for 25 score behind the three-point line. Although impressive and promising signs nonetheless, this really meant very little, since we all knew that the Lakers at 55th overall had their eyes on Bronny from the start. As LeBron James for years has said he wanted to play alongside his son, the Lakers were quickly able to look past the potential value of a late second rounder for the guarantee of a whole lot of money and keeping their star happy. You may try to counter that, hey, given his health concerns in his freshman season and given his great combine measurements, how bad of a pick could this be? Even given the surging value of second rounders making real impact in the NBA with advanced analytics making statistical outliers easier and easier to find, late second rounders have been proven to be little more than just a gamble. Rarely lasting over a couple of years in the NBA, but it is still very difficult to find any player drafted into the NBA with anywhere near the lack of productivity that Bronny's miserable freshman year displayed. With medial averages of around 10 points and 5 rebounds a night in college for a late second rounder, Bronny's stat line of under 5 points and 3 rebounds have only been seen twice in Shaq Diallo and Robertas Chictovs. First of which was a physical freak, and second of which was a physically gifted big man, and none of which was an undersized guard who couldn't shoot or handle the ball at an adequate collegiate level. The more and more you dig into Bronny James, the more and more this looks like one of the worst selections in NBA history. But hey, with a 4-year guaranteed deal playing alongside his dad, it's gonna make history in one way or another. But with a position that was more so given than earned in an ocean of pressures and expectations, with what we know about his game thus far, it's hard to imagine him rising to the top rather than drowning at the bottom, which certainly was the case for Jahlil Okafor. It was really hard to imagine a flop this bad after Jahlil's dominating high school career, historic college season, and all-rookie first-team performance in the NBA. But Jahlil Okafor was certainly one that was doomed for disaster from the start. Jahlil's been a household name for a number of years due to his domination on the AAU scene and at the high school level. And as a 6'9" beast with ridiculous touch, great footwork, a deep bag of post moves and counter moves out of each of them, it would have been difficult to not absolutely dominate the high school game. Ripping up the Chicago and national scenes, Okafor was your state and national player of the year in 2014 and took his talents to the next level where alongside Justice Winslow.
So he came in after Joel Embiid because he got drafted by the 76ers. I remember that. And then you got your boy Young over here. And what the fuck is his name? I forgot his name. But yeah. I think he came in after Joel Embiid.
And Tyus Jones. These guys were one of the more dominant college teams in recent memory. But really, the game plan was just to get the ball to Jahlil and ride his coattails into the sunset. At 17 points with 8.5 boards a game on a dominant 66% from the field, Jahlil put on an absolute clinic on the block, taking home the AAC Player of the Year and the National Championship trophy in dominating fashion. With some of the most impressive interior scoring that the game's seen in a while, Jahlil was one of the most polished post scorers that college basketball had ever seen, and for most of the season held the throne as the first overall draft pick in the 2015 NBA Draft. Despite the ongoing dominance throughout the season, the emerging talents of Karl Anthony Towns for the Kentucky Wildcats started to steal some buzz away from the Jahlil show. See, and what was actually a bit weird looking back at it, at 10 points with under 7 boards and 2.3 blocks a game, Karl Anthony Towns was coming into the league as a defensive anchor with offensive potential. And with 2 3-balls and 8 attempts all year, he wasn't close to the Karl Anthony Towns that we know now. And frankly, when it comes to his play at the collegiate level, he really wasn't even that close to Jahlil Okafor. Jahlil was far and away the best player at the collegiate level. What caused the sudden drop off of Okafor's draft stock wasn't his competition, wasn't a fall off of his own production, and really didn't even have to do with his weakness as a player. Although there was concern for Okafor's defensive weaknesses as a big man especially, everyone already knew this. What the world didn't see coming was the radical shift in play style set forth by the Golden State Warriors in 2015. Basketball since the beginning has been dominated by interior scoring bigs who can demand defensive attention and score or create for others due to their offensive gravity. But rapidly in the NBA, that power dynamic completely shifted to pulling all defensive attention away from the basket to create some of the most efficient offenses in NBA history. This wave really was yet to hit the college game, but certainly hit scouts' radars, as although his totals really couldn't hold up independently at all against Okafor, Towns became the consensus number 1 for the Minnesota Timberwolves, which left the Los Angeles Lakers at number 2. With Kobe on his way out in his last year, and Jordan Clarkson as well as Julius Randle looking to start the reboot of the Los Angeles Lakers, this left a hole at the center position that Jahlil certainly could fill. And with Randle coming off of injury, there was hopes that the other post could help space the floor.
What kind of shot was that?
And with Randle coming off of injury, there was hopes that the other...
What the hell? What the hell you doing? Hold on.
That Jahlil certainly could fill. And with Randle coming off of injury, there was hopes that the other post could help space the floor alongside Okafor and make up for some of his defensive and rebounding woes, while all of the young players would have the honor of learning under Kobe in his final season. But the Lakers found a different option. Likely seeing the way that the league was shifting, the Lakers chose to opt with their guard of the future instead in D'Angelo Russell, opting with space and pace over interior presence. Although his fit certainly didn't work out great, this left Jahlil Okafor to the Sixers, which really couldn't have been worse. After drafting Nerlens Noel and Joel Embiid in the years prior, Jahlil landed on the worst team in the NBA that already had 2 players at his position, but with an injured Embiid, an underperforming Nerlens Noel, and a tanking roster smack in the middle of the process. This meant that this thing was the Jahlil show. With a whole lot of touches and a loose leash on the floor, Jahlil had the freedom to make the 76ers his, and in response, Okafor put up a very...
Look how much the game changed. You got 2 non-shooting big men on the court at the same time, bro. Now, you gotta have a stretch 5 big man to actually be competing for the NBA championship. Look at what the Knicks just did for Karl Anthony Towns. They traded the whole house just to get Karl Anthony Towns at center, but they needed a center because Robinson was hurt. So I understand why they did it, but man, they went all in to something with Mikal Bridges, trading away 5 first-round picks for him, signing OG Anunoby to a $212 million max contract as a role player, and now you finna pay Karl Anthony Towns for years to come too, plus Jalen Brunson. Like, that team is definitely gonna be over the second apron, and Karl Anthony Towns gonna be at center shooting, bro. But you see how this game changed today's versus back then. You have Nerlens Noel and you have Jahlil Okafor on the floor at the same time. Ain't no way that's gonna work in today's game. Ain't no way.
Jahlil had the freedom to make the 76ers his, and in response, Okafor put up a very respectable 17.5 and 7 boards a night. It really wasn't a bad season whatsoever, sliding into an all-rookie first team and coming in 5th in Rookie of the Year voting. Okafor instantly was a guy that you could routinely go to for inside looks, and 1 year into his career, there wasn't really a peep for many doubters knocking his play. But the further you dig into this season, the easier it is to understand the emptiness of his play. At 10-72, these Sixers were one of the worst teams that the NBA has ever seen, and that's no exaggeration. Starting out 0-16, these guys were in full-on tank mode, and with tempers flaring, Okafor would find himself in the center of a controversy after shoving a fan in Boston. To make things worse, Jahlil would suffer a torn meniscus that would sideline him 29 games this season. But even while he was still playing, Jahlil was one of the least effective players in the NBA, with the team's worst 16-point on-off differential per 100 possessions. Ouch. The holes in Okafor's game became very visible very quickly. Not only was he an abysmal defender who seemed to really care less about that side of the floor, but even with solid totals of 17 points a game on above 50% from the field, when you can't spread the floor for your teammates, run a pick and roll, or pass out of double teams in the low post, you really can't be an effective offensive player unless you're over-the-top dominant, which Jahlil certainly wasn't. Jahlil would be completely outshined by Joel Embiid after basically 1 game in the NBA, and since that day, Philly fans have essentially essentially forgotten about the Jahlil Okafor experiment ever since it happened. After playing limited minutes in an injury-ridden sophomore season, Okafor would request a trade out of Philadelphia, who would then let his talents rot on the bench for months to come before finally finding a taker for his mediocre talents. As Okafor would bounce from team to team, putting up upwards of 8 points per game on 60% shooting, this still wasn't enough to lock up a long-term deal for a 25-year-old who was 60% shooting. This still wasn't enough to lock up a long-term deal for a 25-year-old who was just the best big man in college basketball. Jahlil really didn't disappoint in any way, as anyone who watched him throughout his younger years likely wasn't surprised at the final product at all. But as the NBA completely evolved into a different style of play, Jahlil's one-dimensional game was really just left in the past. Although Jahlil undeniably had some talent when he entered the NBA, it seems that Hasheem Thabeet had the absolute opposite problem.
Hasheem Thabeet, I forgot about him. The straight scrub when he came to the NBA, but in college he was dominated as a mug, bruh. I think he played for the Memphis Grizzlies or something like that back in the day, and didn't do nothing. Nothing. And I think he's probably the biggest bust of all time. For real, if you want to be completely honest. Him and Greg Oden were just out because of injuries. But Hasheem Thabeet, I think he's the biggest bust of all time. Most definitely.
Hasheem Thabeet was a very raw and unpolished prospect upon conclusion of his high school career. In fact, with no real coordination, no touch, no post moves, no jump shot, and no handle on the ball, skills-wise, Hasheem was absolutely brutal. But standing at around 7'2 to 7'3, Hasheem was still dominating and putting up 16, 10, and 4 blocks a game after only playing basketball for a few years. With a very limited scouting pool, having only been in America for a couple years, and being a major project player in general, his collegiate offers were very limited. Therefore, when coach Jim Calhoun at UConn was willing to take on the assignment due to the potential of having a 7'3" anchor beating shots like volleyballs, but according to Coach Calhoun, when Thabeet arrived at UConn his freshman year, this kid just straight up couldn't play at all. At just 6 points a game in 24 minutes his freshman season, it became very clear that this guy's offensive skill set was pretty much non-existent. He couldn't really create space to be a dump-off or lob guy, his hands weren't good at all, his feet were clunky, he couldn't shoot, and he had no touch. But with just under a crazy 4 blocks a game, it seemed like every shot around the basket Hasheem got his hands on. As Thabeet would see an increase in minutes the following season, his numbers would rise to 10 and 8 with a ridiculous 4.5 blocks a game, despite his clear and massive holes in his game. I mean, 4.5 blocks is some Dikembe Mutombo level rim protection. And Hasheem Thabeet started garnering heaping amounts of attention as the UConn Huskies were one of the best teams in college his junior season. Hasheem soared north of 13.5 a game his junior year on over 60%. Tad to 4.2 a game. He's still putting up video game defensive numbers, while his offensive output seemed good enough to be serviceable in the NBA, given that he was expected to be an immediate defensive star. Hasheem for the majority of the season mocked in around the 3rd pick in the 2009 NBA draft. However, under the radar there were certainly lots of scouts who weren't anywhere near sold on Thabeet as a prospect whatsoever. For starters, of course, his offensive game was poor. There were no signs that Hasheem was going to be growing into an even average offensive player in the NBA, as all of his points were from dump-offs where his guard generated the points for him, or offensive rebounds just from being big and being in the right spot. But really, even there, that wasn't the end of the criticisms. Thabeet proved.
The thing about him though, bro, is like back then I heard a lot of hype about him, and I think he was on the cover of a game or NCAA game back in the day. Like, it was a lot of hype about him, even though they saying that I was younger, even though they saying that he didn't have really no offensive game, he just was tall and just knew how to block shots. It was a lot of hype around this dude though. It was a lot of hype around this dude.
Proved himself as an elite shot blocker at the college level. But outside of the college level, there really isn't any defensive studs with foot speed anywhere near this slow. When not relying on his size, Thabeet really hadn't proved himself as a pick-and-roll defender or a low-post guy over anyone with a decent big guy. Despite being in a draft class with some incredible talents including Steph Curry, DeMar DeRozan, James Harden, Jeff Teague, Blake Griffin, and Drew Holiday, Hasheem Thabeet would be taken 2nd overall after BG in one of the most stacked NBA drafts of the 21st century. Although the pick kind of made sense on paper with Griffin off the board and the Grizzlies having a major hole at the center spot with Marc Gasol yet to break out, and OJ Mayo and Mike Conley looking like the Grizzlies' guards of the future, Memphis was hoping that with the existing offense.
Didn't they say the Thunder? I knew he played for the Grizzlies.
Of talent, they would be able to hide Hasheem a bit as he develops, while he instantly steps into the role as their new defensive anchor. But boy were they wrong. As Hasheem arrived on the scene at practice, it took assistant coach David Stoudemire a whopping 10 minutes of watching Thabeet play to realize they royally screwed this one up. 10 minutes. Everything that the scouts worried about his game seemed to be worst case scenario. At 3 points per game with 1.3 blocks, Hasheem clocked twice as many fouls as blocked shots and more fouls than buckets this year. Frankly, when it comes to just being a worse player than the scouts anticipated, Hasheem Thabeet is the most disappointing player drafted this high ever. Failing to score over 2 points for the rest of his career, there was really little that Hasheem did to a high level when he couldn't just stand under the basket and block shots. His offensive game was as brutal as you'd expect, and his defense was beyond disappointing for who was supposed to be literally an all-time defender.
Damn.
The mix of his lack of strength guarding NBA and his lack of foot speed on pick and rolls led to frequent foul trouble that he never figured out. And after just 1 year, this second overall pick was playing in the D-League. Thabeet would be moved from Houston to Portland, then to OKC, where he would play out his final years in the NBA. Although sadly Thabeet would never crack a role simply due to him never really being an NBA player, Hasheem would earn the respect of his teammates and coaches alike throughout this short stint. Despite being labeled as a bust and a failure immediately entering the NBA, Hasheem worked harder than superstars and challenged his teammates day after day to do the best he could in his limited role in the NBA. After just 5 short years, Thabeet would play his final game of the league, finishing with career averages of 2.2 points and 2.7 rebounds with 0.8 blocks a game. Hasheem's career was certainly nowhere near what we hoped for him, but likely due to all the effort he put in and the attitude he had towards the game, Hasheem is one of those busts that you don't hear about that often. He had the heart, he just simply didn't have the talent. And if that doesn't sound like the absolute opposite of Ben Simmons, then I don't know what does.
He disappointed me so bad, bro. When I tell you, everybody was comparing this dude to LeBron James, Magic Johnson, best prospect since LeBron James. This man, first 2 years or after, because I think he got injured his first year in the NBA. That second year, he was like an all-star. Like, he was playing up until he passed up that shot over Young. What's his first name? The young dude from the point guard from the Atlanta Falcons. Pause. I said Atlanta Falcons. The point guard from Atlanta Hawks, Young, he ever since that moment, bro, he just went downhill. He been getting injured. He been dressing up on the sideline instead of wanting to play, just collecting a paycheck. It's been bad for Ben Simmons. Now he just came back from back surgery again for the Brooklyn Nets, and this man he's scared to score. Then you always hear about him shooting over the offseason. Oh, he developed a shot. Don't never take it in the game. It's just, man, hey.
Simmons had it all. Best player in high school by a landslide, #1 pick in the draft, awards, achievements, and a lock for one of the best players in the league moving forward. Fast forward now, and he's riding the bench, barely finding a role in the NBA. A result that was shocking to many, but really the future of Ben Simmons was staring us in the eyes from the start. Ben Simmons was an anomaly from the beginning of his career, really up until now. There really isn't anyone else with a story like his. Coming from a dad who was putting up 40 bombs in the Australian basketball leagues, there really wasn't a level of youth basketball that Ben Simmons wasn't absolutely dominating. Simmons dropped all other loves, which really were just other sports, because this kid could care less about anything to do with academics, and set his focus on becoming the best prospect in the world. And he was successful, taking up a scholarship to play at the Institute of Sport in 2012 and representing the Australian national team at 15 years old. I mean, I know we take international accomplishments way more seriously now than we used to, but even at this time, I remember watching videos of this freaky athletic freshman who could handle the ball and pass the ball at 6'8". But to really step into the brightest lights, Ben Simmons would transfer to Montverde Academy in Florida to turn up the recruiting hype tenfold. Playing alongside future Eskimo bro and D'Angelo Russell, the two were far and away the best duo in the country, as Simmons soared to the top of the ESPN Top 100 list, averaging 18.5 points with 10 boards and 3 assists a game on the 28-0 national champions as a junior. The show was really on the road here. Ben Simmons was the best high school player in the 2015 class, and it wasn't even a debate. Simmons could shift bigs or guards off the bounce, find shooters, rollers, or dump-offs, grab a board and fly out in transition, kick out of double teams if he had to, and if all else failed, he could just bulldoze to the rim and dunk over whoever he wanted to. Simmons was so talented that even for the most elite players in high school basketball, there was really no answer to his game. It may seem like an irrelevant achievement, especially given where he landed, but Ben Simmons was truly one of the best players to ever play basketball in the States. At 28 points with 12 rebounds, 4 assists, and 2.6 steals a game, shooting 70% from the field with a Naismith and Gatorade Player of the Year award, barring injury, no defense from the field.
27 points, 4 assists, 11 rebounds, 2.8. Like,
with a Naismith and Gatorade Player of the Year award, barring injury, nobody was going to stop Ben Simmons from going #1 in the 2016 draft. And even if he did get injured, he still might be your consensus #1 pick. With legitimate comparisons to LeBron James, this actually looked like the closest we've seen out of the many way far off comparisons to King James himself. Despite being able to choose which school he wanted to be the face of, Simmons took the road much less traveled to go and dominate on the not-so-competitive LSU Tigers. Putting up 19, 12, and 5 a game, it was clear that Ben Simmons had all of the talent in the world that we had been witnessing for years prior. Ben Simmons left his mark on the NCAA despite missing out on the March Madness tournament. And for good or for bad, there were a lot of areas that Ben could improve on his game. He was already by far the best transition player in the draft, and really one of the best that we have ever seen at this level. He had the vision of an NBA point guard and the physical gifts that very, very few could compare to. Simmons was set to become an instant impact player in the NBA. But with his pretty poor back to the basket game, poor pick and roll play as a roll man and a ball handler, and his, of course, non-existent jump shot, were some main key areas of improvement that if he could improve on, could seriously unlock what would be one of the greatest players to ever lace them up. But in reality, there were a few downsides from picking Ben Simmons that the world was entirely overlooking. Simmons would be criticized by teammates and coaches alike for simply giving up when things weren't going his way. And for your very own to speak up on issues like that speaks wonders to his character. Ben Simmons at every level of basketball knew nothing other than pure domination. But really, if the Monstars could come and take away his God-given talent, there isn't any reason to believe he would find much success at all. He wasn't a very skilled player, but with a 1 in a billion frame with athleticism and coordination to
That's the boy name, Trae Young. Trae Young. Ever since I played with Trae Young, when he passed up a shot over Trae Young, it's been bad for Ben Simmons. It went downhill. Never again. He ain't the same player no more. Like, he just forgot how to score, forgot how to do anything.
Basketball was extremely easy for him compared to the average person. And without really having to struggle at any point in his journey to the league, how the hell would this kid react when the best coaches in the world can game plan against him and he's already showing the signs of a quitter? With the talent on the board, there was no question if the 76ers were going to take Simmons. And without hesitation, they created the duo of the future in Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons. He would be sidelined by injury in his rookie season, but if you thought he couldn't dominate the NBA off of talent alone, boy would you be wrong. At 16, 8, and 8, Simmons put together one of the best rookie years to date. Off of little more than we had seen in the past, Ben Simmons helped carry this franchise to one of the best young cores in the NBA. But upon his first trip to the playoffs, the NBA and Ben Simmons were given a serious reality check. Off of excellent game planning from Brad Stevens and an excellent Ben Simmons stopper in Al Horford, playing to his weakness and eliminating his transition play as well as forcing him to make plays in the half court outside of the restricted area, absolutely shut down Ben Simmons harder than we've really seen any other star get stopped in the past, highlighted by his infamous 1 point, 0 for 5 turnover performance. Simmons would go on in the next few years to rack up all-star games, earn discussion as one of the best defenders in the world, got a big old contract, and really seemed to be one that was ready to take over the NBA. But time after time, Ben Simmons would disappear when it matters the most. After an underperformance in 2019 against Toronto with the best Philly team since Allen Iverson in an injury-ridden 2020 campaign, Philadelphia quickly began to grow tired of Simmons' stagnant improvements and utter performance when put against the slightest bit of resistance. But all came crashing down, of course, in that infamous Atlanta Hawks series. Despite shooting 45 free throws, Simmons failed to average a measly 10 points a game, getting carried by Steph Curry's brother. And as the clock was ticking down with his chance of rebuttal, Simmons made the pass heard around the world, passing up a layup.
That shit was so terrible, bro. I was so pissed. I'm like, nigga, shoot the ball. That's Trae Young. And ever since then, I think Doc Rivers threw him under the bus. Joel Embiid threw him under the bus. The whole social media world threw him under the bus after this. It was bad, man.
up
was
over
bad.
a 4'5" traffic cone. Ben Simmons killed the momentum of this Philadelphia franchise so bad that even his own coach and teammates had to throw him under the bus for it. As times got tough and his fans and team seemed to turn on him, Ben Simmons would once again quit, requesting a trade out of Philadelphia. Simmons would be absent from all team activities until $8 million would be put on the line, and after being kicked out of practice for refusing to participate, he was then fined more money than most people make in a lifetime for refusing to do his job because some people were mean to him. After being shipped out to what seemed like a much better fit, filling in as a playmaker and defender next to Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant, Simmons' play would see a disastrous fall off from up near a 17-point triple-double down to 6, 8, and 6 as one of the least effective offensive players in the entire NBA. It's safe to say that although he had all of the talent in the world, if you conditioned your mind to quit, you may win the sprint, but the NBA is certainly a marathon. Simmons certainly ran into some bad luck on his journey in the NBA, but due to his response to his misfortunes, it's really hard to feel bad for him at all. But the same can certainly not be said for Greg Oden, who had one of the most heartbreaking careers in recent memory.
He was just
Prior to the
injured a lot.
NBA, Greg Oden wasn't known as a good player. He was known as a generational one, being labeled as the next Bill Russell in middle school. I mean, the expectation.
He had a lot of hype around him too, so, just like Hasheem Thabeet, but he was better. But I feel like he just got derailed with injuries.
Really spoke for themselves. Alongside his partner in crime, Oden and Mike Conley would lose in the state championship their freshman year to future NBA player Courtney Lee, who referred to them as the hardest matchup of his life, which stood true as the duo would sweep the next 3 straight championships in the state of basketball. At 22 points and 10.5 rebounds on an unfair 74% from the field, Oden was one of the most ridiculous big men prospects of the 2000s. With tons of strength and touch inside, being a pretty solid all-around big man was enough to set him as the top player in the country, due to his ridiculous defensive ability, being able to time his blocks without fouling, and with weirdly quick feet for someone of his size. Greg Oden was a freak who looked like he was made in a lab to deny you from scoring at the rim. Oden was everywhere. Mr. Basketball Awards, All-American MVPs, cover of magazines, and was labeled as the best prospect since Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. But as a quiet and humble kid, it really seemed like he just wanted to keep having fun on the court with his friends just like any other kid. And committing to Ohio State alongside Conley continued that after the NBA added the one-and-done rule in which Oden was about to go first overall out of high school. But at 16 and 10 with 3 blocks a game and some blockbuster moments like a game-saving block and season-saving block in the Sweet 16, and a very loud 25-point, 12-rebound, and 4-block performance in the national championship against 2 of the best interior defenders of the era, Greg Oden was set to make a splash in the NBA regardless. But as another star player out of Texas quickly began grabbing the world by storm with a major scoring explosion, this quickly made him one of the most controversial picks in a while. Despite what we know in retrospect, Greg Oden was the clear answer for the first overall selection. After Zach Randolph would leave the Blazers, this team was ran by emerging scorers in LaMarcus Aldridge and Brandon Roy. What they were missing was, well, Greg Oden. I couldn't think of a much better fit. But even if you're looking to disregard fit entirely, Oden was simply more impressive. With a higher vertical leap, insanely impressive lane agility again beating Durant, and a faster 3/4 sprint, Greg Oden was really the right selection given what we know at the time. However, there was one major red flag that went completely under the radar when it came to draft time. Due to a hip surgery in the 6th grade, Greg Oden was balancing his 7-foot, 250-pound frame on his 2 legs that weren't the same length. Oden would proceed to injure his right knee, sidelining him for over a year of play prior to his rookie season, and as the Trailblazers would keep him off of his feet for a year, Oden would pile an extra 40 pounds onto his already injured knee and disproportionate lower body. This thing was really over before it started, but despite that, he was putting up per 36-minute numbers of 15 and 12 with 2 blocks, and 17 and 13 with 3.5 blocks in the year to follow that. Greg Oden was seriously looking like the real deal in his time on the floor. Of the 62 games, in fact, that Aldridge, Roy, and Oden played on the floor together, they would go a crazy 52 and 10 during this time, before sadly, partway through his 2nd year on the floor, Oden would blow out his knee for a 2nd time, which led to a 3rd, and soon after would lead to 3.5 years off the floor. Oden is certainly one of the sadder cases, since really his play was everything we expected to be. But no matter what his excuse is, Oden was just another one of this list of players that was destined to fail from the jump. Thank you for watching. If you made it this far, and peace out.
Yeah, man. Like I said, bro, it was a lot. It's a lot of busts nowadays, bro. It's been a lot of busts nowadays. Hasheem Thabeet, the biggest bust to me of all time. Like I said, Greg Oden, he was just injured a lot throughout his whole career. Life happens, bro. You never know. You never know, man.
This is the end of the video, man. Hope you like, comment, and subscribe. Comment down below what you want me to react to next. And I'm going to see y'all next time. Hey, peace.